Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and thank you for joining me for another true crime deep dive. Today we're talking about a case that is certain to be upsetting to everyone. No matter who you are, what you feel, everyone's going to be upset by this case. And I want to let you know that ahead of time because it is truly disturbing, but there are things to be discussed because, this is somebody's life, first of all, so there's always things to be discussed, but there's also some question as to whether or not the individual who's currently behind bars for committing this crime deserves to be there or not. We're going over the case of 3-year-old Hannah Wesche, who was rushed to the hospital after being dropped off at the home of her babysitter, 36-year-old Lindsay Parton. This case is going to be in 2 videos. The first video, we're going to go over the case, the state's case, what they said happened, their experts, etc. And in the second video, we're going to go over why Lindsay Parton and her defense team, as well as her supporters, which seem to be many, believe that she is innocent. But before we dive in, let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video, Native. I mean, we've been down this road before. I love Native and I will sing its praises from the rooftops whenever I can. I've been exclusively using Native deodorant and body wash for over a year now. There's so much to love about this brand. Native deodorants are made with familiar and simple ingredients that you know and love, such as coconut oil and shea butter. Okay, so check these out. They are aluminum free, they are paraben free, they're vegan and cruelty free. Best of all, the texture is so smooth and it dries so quickly. You just open it up, roll it up, couple swipes of this guy. It's dry, it's good, it's ready to go. They also have a wide range of scents that are simple and effective, and they're always adding new and limited edition scents. This past month, I've been using their special edition scent, Ginger Lemonade Cupcake, in both the deodorant and body wash, and this scent is from Native's new limited edition cupcake-inspired collection with Baked by Melissa, and I have to say, I'm loving it. It's coming up hot on the tail of my all-time favorite, Cherry Vanilla Macaron. Cherry Vanilla Macaron, I think, is always going to be my top. I think everybody should send Native an email, at them on social media, tell them to make it a permanent scent. And in fact, my sister-in-law, Jamie, who watches my videos, shout out to Jamie, she said she wanted to try it, but they don't offer it anymore. So even though I ordered a bunch of these when they were available and I hoarded them, I am giving this brand new one, this unused Cherry Vanilla Macaron deodorant to Jamie. So Jamie, this is yours, and it's going to be very difficult for me to part with it. So like I said, just inundate Native and tell them to make it a permanent scent because I love it. But some of my all-time tried and true favorite scents are the cucumber mint. I also love the sea salt and cedar and Coastal Oak and Amber. I mean, you can tell this guy, it's kind of, he's been used. He's been used. These scents, in my opinion, they have that sort of masculine, sexy smell that I dig, and I have been known to prefer men's cologne to women's cologne because I really am drawn to those notes. Native uses simple and effective ingredients. They have amazing scents. That's all great, but do they work? And I'm here to tell you, yes, they do. Native stays on all day with 24-hour odor protection, even after a full day of moving around, even after hours of sitting in front of hot recording lights, even when hanging out on the beach in Mexico, sweating my butt off and swimming, I stay smelling clean and fresh all day long. I recently started taking aerial yoga classes, and during my classes, I've been sweating a lot more than I thought I would. I didn't think it was going to be that intensive. And my body's in all these twisty positions, which sometimes places my nose directly in my armpit. And I'm not afraid to take a deep yoga breath right into that armpit. In fact, I welcome it. Native also offers a plastic-free version of their deodorants as well with the same great formula but in a more sustainable packaging, and they have so much more than deodorant. Their body washes are incomparable. Okay, I will use them exclusively for as long as Native keeps making them. They foam so beautifully, but they never dry my skin out. My whole bathroom and bedroom smells like a spa after I'm done showering. They also have a really great toothpaste. My husband only uses the Native charcoal toothpaste now because he says it leaves his teeth feeling so clean and his mouth feeling fresh. So really, everything they have is amazing. Now, 3 deodorants would normally be $39, but if you use my link and my code code StephanieH18, you'll get them for $26. That's over 33% off. With my code StephanieH18, you'll also get 20% off any body wash or toothpaste. So stock up on those body washes, because you know I'm going to, using my own code. One more time, click the link in the description box. Use code StephanieH18 so you can get 3 deodorants for only $26 and 20% off any body wash or toothpaste. Thank you so much to Native for sponsoring today's video, and let's dive in. On the morning of March 8th, 2018, Jason Wesche got his 3-year-old daughter Hannah up so that he could drop her off to the home of her babysitter before he went to work for the day. Hannah Wesche was born on January 11th, 2015 in Louisville, Kentucky, and from her first moments, she had a difficult road ahead of her. When she came into the world, Hannah was born to a mother who had been addicted to heroin, and as a baby, she needed to remain in the NICU unit for 92 days while doctors worked to wean her off the drugs that had flooded her system in utero. While Hannah stayed in the hospital, her father Jason drove to visit her there several times a week before bringing her home at the age of 3 months, at which point he took full custody since Hannah's mother, Adrienne Latham, was in a drug rehab center at this point. For a while, Jason took Hannah to visit her mother there once a week, but after some time, Jason lost his job and he found himself in dire straits. For 2 years, Jason and Hannah, they didn't really have a place to live, and Jason would take Hannah to his brother's house where she would sleep inside while he slept outside in his car. They were essentially homeless. When Jason found a construction job in Hanover Township, Ohio, Jason and Hannah relocated, moving into a home located at 4004 Shank Road in Butler County, where Jason did his best to care for his small daughter while he worked 12 hours a day. Initially, it was tough to find someone he could trust to care for Hannah while he was at work, and he was driving quite a distance every morning to bring her to a babysitter. But he received what he believed at that time to be a helpful tip. The company that Jason was working for is called Smith Construction Corp., and the son of the owner, TJ Smith, he informed Jason that his wife Lindsay was a babysitter, and the best part was she lived right next door to Jason and Hannah. Now, in the next video, we're going to talk more about TJ Smith because there's stuff to talk about. We're not going to talk about him much in this video. We are going to talk about him next video. Jason was relieved because Lindsay seemed to be the perfect caregiver for his daughter. She had 2 young daughters of her own, and she also cared for another small child around Hannah's age. And now Hannah would have 3 other little girls to play with, and Lindsay would, take the girls to the zoo or to the creek to get river rocks to paint. She was even teaching the girls their letters and shapes and helping Jason potty train Hannah. And she only charged Jason $30 a day to keep Hannah from very early in the morning until he was done with work, which was usually 5, 6, even 7 o'clock at night sometimes. It was the perfect situation, and maybe he was finally getting a little piece of good luck after all the hardship that he and Hannah had gone through. At least that's what Jason thought. However, it did seem that little Hannah was having regular accidents when in the care of her babysitter. And the week before March 8th, Jason had some conversations with Lindsay about bruises he was seeing on his daughter when she came home at night. Jason noticed bruises on little Hannah's chest and at one point bruising under her eye, as well as a pretty bad bruise scrape under her chin. Lindsay explained to him that Hannah was just rambunctious and she was always on the move. And she'd actually fallen on some gravel in the driveway on March 6th. And then the next day, on March 7th, Hannah had been playing in the concrete-floored garage with the other little girls when she'd stood on top of a little toy train with wheels. As she was standing on this train, it slipped out from underneath her, and then she came down on the handlebars, bruising her chin. Now, Jason obviously understood that little kids sometimes get scrapes and bruises, and he knew that Lindsay was a good mom, and that whenever he saw her with Hannah, she seemed to be very doting and affectionate, so he had accepted her version of events without much question. After Hannah got up on the morning of March 8th, Jason said she had some cereal for breakfast, he helped her brush her teeth, and then she got herself dressed because, she's at that age where she was becoming more independent and she had been insisting on getting dressed on her own without his help. And to have a 3-year-old start to exert that independence, that's completely normal. In a lot of ways, Hannah was a typical 3-year-old who loved sticking out her tongue, playing peekaboo with her 2 older sisters, hanging out with her dad while he played video games, bouncing on trampolines, smiling all the time, and getting into everything. Because the curiosity of a 3-year-old is endless. Her favorite food was hot dogs. She was full of joy. She laughed a lot, and she was obsessed with Minnie Mouse. After having such a rough start in life, Hannah at 3 was a lovely, active, happy little girl. Now, on March 8th, it was very cold on this specific morning, so Jason helped Hannah get into her coat and her shoes, and he wrapped a blanket around her before sending a text to Lindsay Parton at 6:52 a.m., letting her know that they were getting ready to leave. Less than a minute later, Lindsay's response came, saying simply, "Okay." Now, Jason said that Hannah was acting pretty normal this morning. He did notice that something was a bit different about Hannah because the distance between his house and Lindsay's was only about 300 feet. But he'd drive over because he had to go to work after that, and he'd usually drive over with Hannah sitting in his lap because she liked to pretend to be in the driver's seat and she liked to pretend to be driving. On this morning, Hannah didn't want to sit in the front seat. She wanted to lay down in the back seat. And when they arrived at Lindsay's house, Jason picked Hannah up. He still had the blanket wrapped around her, and he brought her through the garage of Lindsay's home where Lindsay was waiting for them. According to Jason, Hannah was a bit clingy that morning, and he said, quote, "That morning was a little different because she kept asking for a kiss over and over again," end quote. And later, Lindsay will corroborate this, saying that Hannah kept asking for double kisses and more hugs, and she didn't want her father to leave. Jason Wesche gave his daughter as many kisses as he could before turning to leave, not knowing that these were the last kisses he would ever receive from little Hannah. After getting back into his car, Jason did not have far to go. His work truck was parked in a pole barn at the end of Shank Road, owned by his employer, Smith Construction Corp. Jason claims he got out of his car and entered his work truck. He turned it on and let it warm up while he returned to his personal vehicle to get his belongings out of it, including his cell phone. So for anybody who has a work vehicle and a personal vehicle, when you're switching over to your work vehicle, you gotta take some stuff out of your personal vehicle and put it in your work vehicle. Your cell phone, your lunch, your wallet, driver's license, whatever. All of these things that you have in your personal vehicle, your sunglasses, whatever, you're gonna now put them in your work vehicle. But when he went back to his vehicle to get his phone and his personal belongings, he realized he'd missed a call from Hannah's babysitter, Lindsay Parton, a call that had come in at 7 a.m. So Jason hurriedly called Lindsay back less than a minute after the missed call had come in, and she told him that something had happened to Hannah. So he jumped into his car and he sped back to her house. At 7:02 a.m., Lindsay Parton placed a 911 call, telling the operator that 3-year-old Hannah had collapsed within moments of being dropped off.
I babysit kids.
Yes.
And he just dropped her off, and all of a sudden she just passed out.
Who's passed out?
The little girl, she's 3. She felt pretty bad yesterday, and she's been fine. And then all of a sudden he dropped her off this morning, and she walked in, and she just kind of passed out, and she went limp.
Okay.
I don't know.
Are you with her now?
Yes, and so is her dad. I called her. Yes, hurry, she's bad. There's something wrong.
Okay. Is she awake right now?
Yeah.
No, stay on the line with me. I have to ask you a few questions while my partner gets the medics dispatched. Okay, is she breathing?
Yes, in and out.
Okay.
Yes, in and out. I don't know what's wrong.
Okay, is her breathing completely normal?
Oh, yes, almost gone. Hurry, please.
Okay, they're on the way right now. I'm just asking you a few questions, so while they're on the way.
Let her lay down. I think it's better. I don't know what's better.
Okay, lay her down on her back.
Knock her out.
Lay her down on her back and let her head tilt back.
I'm so sorry that what's happening.
Okay. And she's still unconscious, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
No, she's not unconscious. Her eyes are open and she's gasping for air.
Okay.
Hannah, wake up. cannot believe this is happening. She fell really bad yesterday when we were playing here in the garage. And she has a bruise on her face and on her chin, and I thought she was fine, and she was up and running yesterday.
I want you to stay right with her and make sure her head is carefully tilted back and check her breathing often.
Sir, I just had a robe on. I'm trying to throw clothes on really quick.
That's good. That's okay.
God.
Lindsay claimed that Hannah was breathing, but it wasn't normal. Hannah was unconscious, but her eyes were open and she was gasping for air. Now, in this call, Lindsay does sound panicked at times. At times, she sounds panicked, and then she sort of goes back into normal voice, and she does this as well in police interviews later, but she does sound panicked for the most part. But the question is, does she sound panicked because she has no idea what's happening and she's truly worried about Hannah? Or is she panicked because she had something to do with what happened to Hannah, and she's worried that she's about to be found out? Now, at some point during the 911 call, small children can be heard crying in the background, and Lindsay informs the 911 operator that this is her children crying. And within a short time of her being on the phone, Jason must have arrived. You can hear him in the background, and he also begins trying to help Hannah. Now, at this point, Lindsay states a narrative that will be repeated later to law enforcement, that Hannah had fallen pretty hard the day before in the garage, and she had a bruise on her face. But when she'd arrived that morning, Lindsay had thought she'd seemed completely normal and fine. And then you can hear both Lindsay and Jason talking to Hannah, trying to get her to respond and telling her to keep breathing. And this is very, very hard to listen to because at certain points you can hear Hannah sort of, I guess, gasping for breath and making these little noises. I can't really describe these noises any other way than to say they remind me of when my own small daughter is sick with something bad like the flu. And when she's sleeping, she makes these soft little moaning, gasping sounds when she has a very high fever. It's heartbreaking to listen to. So be warned. And given that Lindsay would later be accused of hurting Hannah, to think that the person who may have hurt this child so brutally that she has become unconscious and unresponsive, and now this person is looming over Hannah, speaking to her sweetly, telling her that she loves her. It's just too much for me. The fear that Hannah must have felt when this was all going down, not knowing what was going on, but if she was aware of anything, she would know that the person who did this to her was now showing so much concern, as if she hadn't been the one to have put Hannah in that position in the first place.
Hey, it's okay. Breathe. Breathe.
Hannah.
It's okay.
Hey, everyone,
breathe. Just breathe, okay? There you go. There you go, honey. There you go.
Dispatch Oxford this way to help on Okay, is that her in the background?
Her breathing, yes.
Yes, okay. Correct. All right. They're on their way to you. I can hear her.
Hey, what's the matter?
Fucking shock or something.
I don't know what the fuck could be wrong with her.
I don't either. She was fine. We just walked in the house.
She got up, brushed her teeth, I don't know.
Lindsay, it's okay. They're on the way.
We just walked in the house and just passed out. It's okay. Keep breathing, my little love bucket. Keep breathing. It's okay. It's okay, baby.
Hannah. Hey.
Hannah, wake up. Hannah, there you go. There you go, baby. No, I know. All of a sudden, I was like, Hannah, are you okay? Just get up, girl. And she was right there, and I got it when she was like limp.
Hannah. Oh, she got it face good.
Yeah, she did on that toy right there.
Hey.
Parkinson.
Hey. Look at Daddy. Hannah. Look up. Baby.
You're okay. I love you.
Hannah.
I love you, Buttercup.
Hey.
Hey, wake up. There we go. Here we go.
At this point, Jason Wesche claims he had no idea what was going on or what was wrong with his daughter. He thought maybe she was having a seizure or something, but he never considered that anyone had hurt Hannah. EMTs arrived on the scene at 4050 Shank Road within 13 minutes, and later, EMT Evan Reedy would testify that when he arrived, Hannah was laying on a couch in the garage. Her breathing was more like a sniffing, very shallow and irregular, and her eyes were moving without purpose. Evan Reedy also observed multiple bruises on Hannah, on her chest, and her eyes were sunken in. Reedy claimed that both he and his partner felt Hannah was unsafe in the environment, and they readied her for transport to Fort Hamilton Hospital. While he was still at the house, though, Evan Reedy claimed that Lindsay told himself and his partner that Hannah had fallen the day before while playing in the garage, a story she repeated to the responding deputy, Damon Meyer, of the Butler County Sheriff's Office. But Lindsay would add another layer of the story when speaking to law enforcement. She claimed that when Hannah was dropped off, Hannah had seemed completely fine. She'd walked into the house and requested a donut and also expressed her desire to sit on the couch. Lindsay claims that as she was helping Hannah get her coat off, Hannah passed out, falling face forward onto the carpeted floor of the entryway between the garage and the kitchen. Deputy Mayer cleared the house, and then he spoke with his supervisor, requesting that detectives be called to the scene, because clearly he felt something was up, something wasn't adding up. At Fort Hamilton Hospital, Hannah was put into the care of Dr. An Nguyen, an ER physician. Dr. Nguyen said that when Hannah arrived, she was unresponsive and unable to breathe on her own. So he intubated her and he placed her on a ventilator. Dr. Nguyen also observed several bruises on Hannah's body, and when he looked in her eyes, he saw that her pupils were not reacting as they should, and there was blood behind her eyes.
It's like she was well developed, well nourished, in acute distress. She was toxic appearing and with multiple ecchymosis. She had a Glasgow Coma scale of 6.
I want to go back and ask you a little bit about that. You say acute distress. What does that mean?
So usually it needs an immediate intervention.
Toxic appearance. You described that. What do you mean by that for those of us who are not medical?
She looks sick.
And you said multiple ecchymosis. What does that mean, ecchymosis?
Bruising.
And you talked about a Glasgow Coma scale. Can you explain to us what a Glasgow Coma scale is?
It's how we determine their responsiveness during a trauma.
What is the purpose of the Glasgow Coma scale?
To determine what intervention is needed. Number 1 is the eye response, and number 2 is verbal response, and then motor response.
Okay. And what is the lowest score you can get on that scale?
A 3.
And what do you have to do to get the score of 3? Or what does the patient appear to look like with a score of 3?
Completely unresponsive.
Okay. And you noted a Glasgow Coma scale of 6.
Okay.
If you could explain, you talked about the different things that you look at, the 3 different things. Mm-hmm. How are those scored? Where do the numbers come from?
Sure.
And what scores did Hannah get in the emergency room?
Sure. So she had no spontaneous eye opening. So that's a 1 on a scale of 4. So the highest you would get is a 4, which is a spontaneous eye opening. She had a 1 for verbal response, which is no verbal response. And she had a 4 to motor response, which is a withdrawal from pain.
So that's how we got to a 6 at that point in time.
Correct.
All right.
Based on these findings, Dr. Nguyen ordered a CT scan to be done of Hannah's head, neck, and face, and then he ordered her to be transported by air to Cincinnati Children's Hospital, where she was put in the care of Dr. Marguerite Carey, the staff neuroradiologist at the Children's Hospital. Dr. Carey looked over the CT scans that had been taken at Fort Hamilton Hospital, and she discovered that the 3-year-old Hannah had a large subdural hemorrhage that was causing the midline of Hannah's brain to shift over to one side of her skull. According to Dr. Carey, this shifting would have caused brain injuries and significant brain abnormalities.
So the child's brain is being pushed over to the left side, and there's this area outside of the brain that's in the subdural space, and that's moderately sized collection that's got high attenuation or bright white. High attenuation is something that we see with hemorrhage that's recently occurred. It's got some areas of dark in it. So to me, this is a subdural hemorrhage that's occurred that's causing mass effect on the brain and kind of pushing the brain over.
In Dr. Carey's opinion, the subdural hemorrhage seen in Hannah's brain would not be consistent with everyday accidents, but was consistent with abusive head trauma. Specifically, it looked like Hannah had likely been shaken. During the trial, Lindsay's defense team, who were doing the most, they tried to sort of shake Dr. Carey on the stand. They tried to get her to admit that this injury could have occurred for a reason other than shaking.
Right. And then you were asked whether or not you held those within a reasonable degree of medical certainty, right?
Yes.
Do you understand that that is the only way that you can get an opinion before a jury, is if you hold an opinion within a reasonable degree of medical certainty? Do you understand that?
Yes, sure.
Do you or don't you?
I guess I'm confused as to what you're asking
Okay,
me.
well, you just talked
Maybe
about
you need to simplify.
possibly shaking and all of that.
I'm not here
Well,
to.
let me finish.
Okay.
All right, and I'm trying to get you, I'm trying to get to you so you understand what I'm trying to get at. All right? Do you appreciate that you cannot give medical opinions unless they meet the legal standard? Do you appreciate that?
Yes.
Okay. Do you understand that you cannot give medical opinions based on possibilities? Yes? Do you understand that or not?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, to a certain extent, yes.
What do you mean to a certain extent?
Yes, I understand that.
Okay. All right. So when you said it's possible that the injuries occurred by shaking, you would agree that that doesn't meet the legal definition of medically probable.
So
You answer my question.
if I could explain this.
I want you to answer my question and then explain it.
I'm sorry.
Answer my question first and then please
So
explain.
ask the question again, please.
All right. When you were talking to the jury about the mechanism of shaking, you said, I think it's possible. That's what you said, right?
These
Answer
injuries
my
in
question.
this child.
Is that what
yes.
you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
do you
shaking
understand? Do you understand that possibilities are not legally sufficient to support opinions in a court of law?
I understand that.
Okay.
Now, could I explain,
Do you-
please, what?
Well, let me finish.
Okay.
And then I'll let you follow up. Okay? So the statement about possibly shaking isn't an opinion that you could possibly hold within a reasonable degree of medical certainty, correct?
It's a possible mechanism for how a child could be injured.
Okay. But you understand that you can't offer an opinion based on possibilities.
I'm not here to give an opinion as to the mechanism of how the child was injured. I'm here to make the medical diagnosis of child abuse, abusive head injury.
All right.
So, which are two completely different things.
And just so it's clear, so this jury understands, you're not saying, I put my weight as a medical professional, as an expert, on an opinion that shaking was a mechanism of injury because it's only possible and not medically probable.
Again, I'm not here.
Answer my question and then follow it up.
Ask me the question again, because it's confusing how you're asking.
All right? And I don't mean to be confusing. I'm doing the best I can. And I think we might be talking from two different worlds.
We are.
Okay. So, we'll start again. But
We can see subdurals that don't cause brain edema or pushing of the brain.
Yeah. And just
So there was a combination of things going on.
Right. And edema swelling.
Correct.
All right. Okay. And I understand there's a combination of things going on. But there was a combination of things going on outside of the brain and inside the brain.
Yes.
And when you just focus on the inside of the brain, and I know that they're interconnected and one was causing the other. But again, it's brain swelling is the brain injury here. Caused
Correct. Yes.
by the cerebral herniation, pressing down, mass effect, causing the herniation. Right?
I mean, the brain edema is not necessarily secondary to the mass effect. Like I said, when we see these injured veins, we not infrequently see this pattern of injury in kids where that whole hemisphere is abnormal. And on MR imaging, we would then see hypoxic ischemic injury to that part of the brain or lack of oxygen and perfusion, blood perfusion to that part of the brain.
I just watch Dr. Carey on the stand, and I watch her face, and she wants to tell him to F off the whole time, right? She's like, you're being condescending to me. You're interrupting me. But what she's trying to say is that, of course, Dr. Carey can't claim for certain what caused this injury because she wasn't there. But in children who have been shaken, they will often see this type of injury. With Hannah's injuries as they were, Dr. Carey did not believe that she would have been able to walk on her own or talk or breathe on her own, and these symptoms would have started within seconds of the injury, which means that Hannah didn't have to be with Lindsay Parton for an extended period of time for Lindsay to have been responsible for what happened. She would have only needed to have been there for a few minutes, which she was. Lindsay's defense team would claim that Lindsay called Hannah's father within minutes of Hannah being in her care, and that this wasn't long enough for Hannah to sustain the injuries that caused her to become unconscious and unresponsive. But Dr. Carey is saying the amount of time that Hannah was with Lindsay was more than enough time for these injuries to have been inflicted on her. And I want to tell you guys that I actually have a friend who is a neurosurgeon, a longtime friend, and I was talking to him about this case yesterday on the phone for an extended period of time. I'm going to see if I can get him to come on camera with me and explain this better, but everything that I was asking him about these medical professionals and their opinions and their conclusions, he agreed with. Dr. Carey would tell the jury that the injuries she saw in Hannah, she would only expect to see those in two situations: abuse and car crashes, not a garden variety fall or even a series of typical childhood falls.
That means that somebody caused this injury to this child. Somebody caused it. And the one way she testified to cause this type of injury is by shaking. And once Hannah received this injury, Dr. Carey told you she would not be acting normally. She would not be acting normally. She told you that she would have been symptomatic within seconds of receiving this injury.
She didn't say seconds. Object. That's not.
Your Honor, may we approach?
Okay.
Objection be overruled pursuant to the conversation that she and Vincent continued.
Dr. Carey told you that she would not have been acting normally after receiving this injury. And within seconds, she would have been symptomatic. That was her testimony.
It's funny because the prosecutor, she says seconds in the closing arguments, and the defense is like, objection, no one said seconds. And it's like, we just heard Dr. Carey say seconds. We know that she did say seconds. And so the lawyers approached the bench, and when the objection was overruled, the prosecutor comes back and she's like, seconds, yeah, I said it, seconds, and I'm going to say it again. Now, it seems to me that during closing arguments in a trial, the other side will object a lot for stupid, extraneous reasons. And in my opinion, it's in order to try and throw off the flow of the attorney giving the closing arguments, because closing arguments are basically like one long monologue. So you always see a ton of dumb objections during closing statements. Additionally, Dr. Michael Yang, a board-certified ophthalmologist, examined Hannah's eyes and found them to be extensively hemorrhaged at all three layers of the eye, a condition he believed was most consistent with non-accidental abusive head trauma.
Well, what that means is that there is injury to the patient, thought to be from the violent shaking of the patient that can cause the vitreous jelly inside the eye to cause a shear force along the retina because it's attached to the retina, and as the two different substances move past each other, there is shearing of blood vessels that can lead to these hemorrhages.
Doctor, is it shaking alone, or could impact also be involved in that?
Well, it depends on. So it could be both, but primarily it's thought to be the shaking. The patients who have just purely impact are much less to have hemorrhages, and the number of hemorrhages are much smaller, and they typically are not in all three layers or extensive like this. We see patients who've gone in through motor vehicle accidents, and as long as the eye itself is not directly traumatized severely, the mere fact that they have an impact on their head or something like that doesn't produce these kinds of hemorrhages.
Once again, we have another medical professional, another doctor, having the opinion that Hannah's injuries were due to a shaking incident. Based on Hannah's CT scan, Dr. Carey believed the child needed immediate emergency surgery, and so a neurosurgeon was brought in to drain the hemorrhage. Now, in order to do this, he had to remove a portion of Hannah's skull, and although he was successful in draining the hemorrhage, Hannah's brain was so inflamed that it began to swell through the portion of skull that had been removed. Post-surgery, Hannah was placed in the care of Dr. Ranjit Chima. Under Dr. Chima's care, Hannah never regained consciousness, and her condition deteriorated to the point where 3 days later, he believed she was progressing towards brain death. On March 18, 2018, 10 days after being placed in the care of her babysitter, 3-year-old Hannah Wesche was taken off of life support and pronounced deceased. Forensic pathologist Dr. Dorothy Dean performed the autopsy on Hannah's remains, and Dr. Dean located multiple bruises on the child's head and body, including bruising on Hannah's back, on her right side head area, on the sides of her body, and a bruise located in the deep muscle tissues on Hannah's neck. Now, Dr. Dean, like the other doctors, also found extensive hemorrhages in Hannah's eyes and a great deal of brain swelling, as well as a shearing injury to her brain. Now, the technical term for this is diffuse axonal injury, and it's basically the shearing or the tearing of the brain's long connecting fibers, and this happens when the brain is injured, causing it to shift and rotate inside the skull. Dr. Dean believed that Hannah's death was caused by a traumatic brain injury due to a blunt, tremendous force that went through her brain, and this would not have been caused by a simple fall. Now, when I say a blunt force through her brain, some people will think that means blunt force trauma. In the way that we understand it in true crime, usually blunt force trauma means somebody was hit over the head with like a blunt object, but blunt force to the brain can be seen in shaking, because I suppose in that situation, the bony skull would be considered the blunt instrument that's causing damage to the brain. So the pathologist, Dr. Dean, agreed with Dr. Carey, saying that Hannah would not have been walking and talking after sustaining the injury, and she would have been neurologically abnormal and unresponsive within moments. And Dr. Dorothy Dean had opinions about the bruising patterns on Hannah's body. Dr. Dean saw some bruises that she attributed to normal childhood activity, such as bruises on the knees. But what she did not feel was typical was bruising on the inside of the knees. There was bruising on Hannah's shoulders, her arms, her buttocks, including a bruise and a laceration type of bruise. There was bruising on her back and her sides, and Dr. Dean found all of these bruises to be concerning. Based on this type of bruising, Dr. Dean could not write them all off as accidental, normal childhood bumps and bruises. In fact, she couldn't do that with the majority of them, and they were all in different stages of healing, which means that Hannah had sustained them over a period of a few days. There were also bruises on Hannah's head that were only visible once Dr. Dean had shaved the child's head during her autopsy, and these bruises were not superficial or on the upper layer of the skin. They were deep. And when Dr. Dean went under the scalp to investigate further, there were deeper bruises there that she hadn't even been able to see beforehand. Hannah had died from a traumatic brain injury due to blunt impact to the back and the side of her head, but she had been brutalized leading up to that injury that took her life.
She had impacts to her head. The impacts alone, the bruises themselves, weren't the problem. It was the blunt force, the tremendous force that went through her brain that was the problem. We all get black and blue marks from time to time, even on our scalp. Those individual bruises themselves don't cause any damage in other people. It's the force that caused those bruises, that caused the damage to the brain itself, is what killed her. What this tells me is there was a lot of force that went through this area. That's how this bruise became there. It's deep in the neck. This is not a trivial bruise. It's deep in the neck. A lot of force had to be transmitted to that section. In an injury like this, what happens to the brain is a shearing force. The brain itself is made up of a lot of nerves and a lot of pieces of the nerves that go elsewhere. So you have the cell body and the axons and other structures too, like vessels. When the brain receives so much force, the brain itself, just the brain itself, shears. The neurons, the cells that make up the brain, are damaged. And if the force is sufficient, the person can't survive. What I saw at autopsy was the result of the shearing injury to the actual brain itself. When the brain is damaged, The only thing it knows to do is call for more blood and for more oxygen. That's what it does. So the body sends more blood to the brain because the oxygen is carried in the red blood cells to the brain. The brain swells because it's calling for more blood because it's damaged. The more it's damaged, the more it swells. And it's a big cycle. Because the brain is damaged, the blood vessels within the brain are also damaged and they become leaky. So what we see is spots of blood within the brain itself. In an autopsy, 10 days after she was injured, I saw actual blood in her brain, hemorrhages in her brain. Her brain stem, and her spinal cord had the results of the shearing injury to the brain itself from the force transmitted to her head.
Dr. Corey even told you that a fall from a second story wouldn't create the type of injury that we're seeing in Hannah Wesche's brain.
At the trial, the prosecution would also call Dr. Kathy Makaroff as an expert witness in child abuse pediatrics, and she held the same opinion as forensic pathologist Dr. Dorothy Dean. Dr. Makaroff identified multiple bruises that she found concerning for child abuse, including bruising around Hannah's eyes, her left ear, her chin, her flanks, which are the sides of her bodies, and her buttocks.
Dr. Makaroff told you that Hannah had bruises to protected areas of her body, areas that you would not injure in a fall. She told you Hannah was a normal, developing, medically healthy child with no exposure to any illness that would predispose her to injury, to abnormal bleeding, not even hepatitis C. They checked that out, ladies and gentlemen. They're looking for other explanations other than child abuse. If Hannah has hepatitis C, does she have a clotting disorder? Are her platelet counts down? Are they elevated? What's going on here? Dr. Makaroff told you hepatitis C is not in play here. They checked Hannah's levels. They checked those levels and they were within normal range. There's no organic cause here causing this type of bruising to Hannah. She told you that the location and the pattern of these bruises is highly suspicious and concerning for child abuse. And even before Dr. Makaroff saw Dr. Young's ophthalmology results, she didn't even see those yet on March 8th, 2018 when she examined this child. She diagnosed definite child abuse, child physical abuse, including abusive head trauma. She told you that the trauma to Hannah's brain, it's not accidental. She sees simple falls all the time. She works with children all the time. She sees simple falls. She sees multiple simple falls. She's seen falls that are from a caregiver's arms. They don't cause that type of bruising that you saw in the state's exhibits. They don't cause the type of injury to Hannah's brain that you've heard testimony about. She said this type of injury was the result of shaking and or impact. We don't know. It's consistent with both. And she unequivocally testified that you can shake a 3-year-old. Absolutely. Unequivocally told you that. And she told you with this degree of injury and Hannah's progression that Hannah would not have been acting normally. She would not have been walking. She would not have been talking. She would have not been taking off her coat, asking for donuts. She would not have been acting normally. And she would have started showing symptoms soon after receiving, shortly after receiving this injury. Potentially even immediately.
So Lindsay Parton was interviewed by law enforcement twice, once on March 8th and again the next day. What's important to note is that during both of these interviews, she was read her rights. She was told that she had the right to have an attorney present. She was told that at any time she could stop talking to the detectives. She then signed a paper stating that she understood these rights twice. Let's go over some pertinent moments during these interviews and follow along as Lindsay's story changes and evolves as she is presented with new information. The sound on these clips is going to be a little echoey at times. Sometimes you're going to hear coughing and like ruffling and shuffling in the background, and that's because this footage was filmed in court as it was being played for the jury. So I tried to only play you clips where you could sort of clearly hear what they were saying, and then I'm going to also try to sum it up for you afterwards. So the detectives asked Lindsay if she had seen Hannah come to her house with bruises on her face prior to the accident, And Lindsay responds, yes. And she begins to illustrate where the bruises were and sort of explain how she thought they came to be.
Where?
Before she felt the journey?
Like one I was like right here, and then she had one on her chin.
It was the one on the chin from when she fell in the gravel.
That got worse. There was one on her chin before that, and then when she fell in the gravel.
So there's bruising before?
Yeah, it got worse. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then Lindsay begins to explain how close she and Hannah were and how much Hannah appreciated Lindsay, because Lindsay was nurturing and loving. And she's not saying that Hannah's father wasn't like that, but he's a man. You know, how much can a man do? And women are different. In fact, just the night before, Hannah had looked at Lindsay and said, quote, "I love you, buddy. You take such good care of me," end quote. Apparently, Buddy is what Hannah called Lindsay, and Lindsay also called Hannah Buddy from time to time. And she makes reference to this several times when she's explaining to the police what she said to Hannah and things like that. Lindsay says she's in complete shock. She has no idea what happened. It was literally 30 seconds to 1 minute of Jason dropping Hannah off that Hannah had collapsed. And Hannah had collapsed before Lindsay had even gotten completely into the house and closed the door.
You hadn't shut the door yet, but you told me that you were walking in towards the kitchen and get her done. No, I hadn't even shut it. You hadn't shut it. I didn't even shut it. No. So you weren't in the same room with her when she turned around and looked at you? No, I was still. So here's the door, here's that chair, here she is. I put my phone down, went to take off my throat.
So right after this is when the detective tells Lindsay that he wants to make sure she's protected and knows her rights. And this is clearly because she's talking a lot, right? You can tell that she wants to talk. She's almost talking too much. She's almost explaining too much. So obviously they want to come in, and before she starts running off at the mouth, they want to get her to say that she understands her rights, that she can have a lawyer present if she wants, etc., etc.
You've been talking about an attorney or anything, so I just want to make sure we're because I have a couple more questions I want to ask you, but I want to make sure you are still well aware of your rights.
Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to go through. And I realize that you should. Right. Okay, but I want to go through them one more time, real fast. Okay, just to make sure I'm good at asking you a couple questions. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can will be used against you in the court of law. You have the right to consult an attorney. If you can't afford one, I'm going to be appointing for you free of charge. You can stop talking to myself or Detective Lambert at any time. Do you understand your rights as I read them to you? Are you okay answering a couple more questions, knowing your rights?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, at some point, both detectives leave the room, and Lindsay begins inspecting her own arms. And I have a theory about this that I'll explain in a moment. So, moving on to the next interview, Lindsay's rights are read to her again. She's all smiling, and she's like, yeah, I still want to talk to you.
I'm going to read it to you if you want to follow along.
Okay.
You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court. You have the right to an attorney. Prior to any questioning, you have the right. One can be provided for you free of charge. If you can't afford one, and you have the right to stop talking to me or Detective Turner or anybody else at any time. You understand those rights? Know those rights, you still want to talk to us?
Yeah.
Feel free to read the front and back of that.
I've read it.
Okay.
And my brother's a police officer, so
Okay.
I get to.
Yeah, where at?
Richmond, Kentucky.
And you can see in the first seconds of him reading the rights, Lindsay's sort of playful, she's bobbing her head like, yeah, I've heard this all before. Totally cash. And they ask her, do you want to read this paper that you're signing again? And she's like, no, I already read it. In my opinion, she wants to appear totally nonchalant. Yeah, I don't need to read that. I trust you guys completely. I have family in law enforcement. Her own brother was a cop, apparently. And she's like, I trust law enforcement. I don't need to read this. I have nothing to hide. Let's go. But this is going to come back to bite her in the trial. And like I said, we'll get there. So in this next clip, Lindsay talks about the babysitting arrangement, how often she had Hannah, how much Jason paid her, etc. From what I could tell, Lindsay only had Hannah Monday through Thursday because she wanted Fridays for her own kids, and at that time, Jason brought Hannah to another sitter, a friend of his. And because he was in construction, if it was a rainy day or a bad weather day, then he didn't bring her to Lindsay's at all because he wasn't working. But it's interesting because you'll hear in this clip, when she's explaining how much she gets paid, she sounds a little bit resentful. She's trying not to, no big deal, but She sounds a little bit resentful.
Yeah.
What do you get paid?
$30 an hour, or 30, I wish. 30 bucks a day. 30 bucks a day. And if it's over 12 hours, like sometimes they work 7 to 7, he'll give me 35. It's kind of like a longer day or whatever, but 30.
I mean, admittedly, $30 a day is a terrible rate, but she did agree to do it, I assume. I know she did, because later when she testifies, she says she did. She says, yeah, it's not a lot of money, but he was a single father. He was new to the area. He was trying to provide for his daughter. And I told him it's more important that you pay your bills and things like that than pay me a ton of money. Hannah's lovely. Don't worry about it. And apparently Jason was sometimes and often behind on his payments to her. We're going to get to that too. Lindsay also mentions, Jason works construction, so he has to get up really early, and that means she has to get up about an hour earlier than she normally would to take Hannah, because her own kids didn't get up that early, and the other little girl didn't get there until later. And Lindsay says, I provide all the food for Hannah, like several meals and snacks a day, whereas the other little girl that I care for, her mother brings meals and snacks. So yeah, it is an expense. Lindsay also mentions that she was usually watching Hannah for 12 hours a day. And it's pretty clear to me, in this interview with the police, she knows that $30 a day isn't enough for watching a 3-year-old all day long. So we do have to keep this in mind as a possible cause of frustration. But should that frustration have been with Hannah? Should that frustration have been taken out on Hannah? The detectives asked Lindsay, when did she last give Hannah a bath? And she says last Monday. And this is very important because during the trial, Lindsay would claim she hadn't given Hannah a bath since February, the previous month. And she makes it sound in the trial that it's been like a full month. So if you look at March 8th, yes, a week before I suppose would be the end of February. But in the trial, she makes it seem like I haven't even given her a bath in over a month, when really it had only been 1 week. Lindsay is then asked, while you're bathing Hannah, did you notice anything? Did you notice bruises? Did you notice injuries?
I don't give Hannah a bath, like, every day. And sometimes Christine always is in Kayla, like, can you get a bath last night? You might give her one today? Things like that. But no, I'm not giving. And a lot of the times, like, my kids get a bath later at night if I didn't do that during the day. And I try to take a shower real quick while they're napping.
Yeah, whenever you can.
That's pretty much how it works. Or I take one at night with my girls in the shower with me.
Okay. So when's the last time you would have given Hannah a bath?
Last week. Probably last Monday.
Any bruising or anything on her when you were doing baths?
No. Just from, normal things like bruises my kids have on their legs from falling on their, I've never not noticed anything. And she's never acted weird towards her dad either. He walks in the door and she runs up to him and, Daddy! Yeah. And then every morning she asks him, are you coming back? Kayla even asked her mom still. I've had Kayla for 2 years. Mom, you come back to get me today?
Yeah.
Now Lindsay says, yeah, she noticed bruises, but just normal things, just kid stuff, like her kids, they got bruises all over them. And then she launches into how, she doesn't believe that Hannah's father, Jason, was hurting her because Hannah never acted weird towards Jason. And she always seemed happy to see her when he picked her up. But no one asked Lindsay if she felt that Jason was abusing his daughter. She just sort of went down that path all by herself. Lindsay also mentions that her own daughter, Vivian, was full of energy. She actually refers to little Vivian as a kamikaze. And then Lindsay says that Hannah was even more wild than that.
No, not ordinary. My Vivian is bruised all over her and from falling. She's a kamikaze.
Yeah.
Savannah.
I got a taste of that this morning.
Yeah, right? They're just wild.
Yeah, all over.
Hannah is more wild than that.
Okay.
She is a dad. That's all she has.
Hannah gets into things. Lindsay is sure she's a handful at home for her father. Lindsay's even had to put her in timeout sometimes. Hannah is wild, after all, so it's normal for her to be covered in bruises and constantly hurting herself, and she's going to elaborate on this in a moment. Lindsay then explains to the detectives how Hannah fell on the gravel the previous Tuesday, March 6th, because, she was running, she was wearing cowboy boots with heels, and she just fell, and she got bruises on her chest from this rough gravel driveway.
So you're very aware of
some bruises.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I looked like pebble bruises from when she fell. She literally, so she had on cowboy boots with the heels.
Yeah.
And Vivian took off running, and I was kind of behind them, far behind them. I should have been up close. And it's a gravel driveway. Like, it's not pebbles. TJ just redid it, and it's rocks. Yeah, it's rocks. It's not pebbles.
Okay.
Yep. That's exactly where she fell, and on her chin. She didn't even, her hand didn't even hit. Like, what she was doing, and I can show you how she was running like this, and then looked back and went like that. Literally.
Did she slide? Or?
No, it was just bam, bam. Yeah. She did, and she got right back up and kept running. I said, "Hey, are you okay? I'm okay."
So all these small little bruises and the ones on the chin.
Yes, I know about those right there.
And even
yes.
the one on
yes,
the
and the one on the chin. Yep.
And the neck.
Yep. Yep.
That's all that from that.
Yes. Well,
She was extended pretty far.
She went like that. Yeah.
Okay.
And on the toilet Wednesday, I noticed that I was like, wow, man, those rocks got you. And I even told him that. I said, the rocks look like they punctured her chest.
Yeah.
I mean, Lindsay, clearly she's got all of this down, right? She even gets up and illustrates for the detectives how Hannah did this. And Lindsay does this a lot, gets up and sort of like play acts. And the detectives, they pull pictures of Hannah out, pictures of Hannah when she's in the hospital. And they're pointing out bruises on these pictures. And Lindsay's like, yep, she got that from the gravel. Yep, she got that from the gravel as well. And she's like, this one I think was from, the toy train when she fell off of it. And this one I think was from this. And she's sort of like identifying them all and saying where she thinks they came from. And this is important. The detectives are luring her into a sort of trap. And Lindsay says she told Hannah's father, Jason, about Hannah falling on the gravel when he picked her up that night. And she said it looked like the rocks punctured her chest or punked her chest. I can't really tell what she's saying, but this will also become important, and I'll draw your attention back to it at the proper time. Lindsay told the detectives that she did notice Hannah had been quiet that week, and even Lindsay's mother had mentioned that something was off with the little girl the previous Monday when they'd been at dance class and Hannah hadn't wanted to dance. Hannah had even been complaining about headaches for a few weeks, and Lindsay makes a point to tell the detectives how accident-prone Hannah was, saying that ever since she's known Hannah, stability has been an issue for her.
My mom, that triggered something in me yesterday when I was talking to her.
Okay.
That she just felt like Hannah was not right Monday.
Yeah.
And she has been complaining of headaches the past couple weeks. And to me, since I've known her, her balance and stability has always been off. She's uncoordinated. Yeah, well, I feel like her legs have always been I don't know, like how that was that. I don't know how to make that sound the way I want it to sound. I don't know. She's just, I don't know how she's
not coordinated.
She's not coordinated.
Good.
Yeah. I mean, with dance, but she's so cute.
So then Lindsay elaborates on how Hannah fell off this toy train with wheels on March 7th and hit her face on the handlebars of this little toy train before hitting her head on the concrete of the garage.
So I didn't actually see the train. I haven't seen the train. How tall is the train?
It's about that high off the ground. And she was standing up on it, doing the surfing thing, and it went out from the side, and she went down like that. Her arms back.
Yeah.
Yeah. And smacked.
Smacked the right side of the face?
And I freaked out and ran out there. I'm like, are you okay? She jumped back up, and she said, yeah, I'm fine. I said, let's go put ice on it, lift it down pretty far.
What was she complaining of?
Headache.
It's so crazy, right? Because it's a human's natural reaction, our natural instinct to put our arms out when we're falling forward. Yet 2 days in a row, Hannah fell forward onto something very hard and rough, gravel and concrete. And neither time did she do this. Neither time did she put her hands out in front of her to break her fall. She just sort of free-falled, like this, like she's going skydiving. Both times. After Hannah hit her face on the train and her head on the concrete, Lindsay applied ice to Hannah's face and head, gave her some ibuprofen, and even though Hannah said she was fine, Lindsay's a worrywart, and she was very concerned still, so she shined a light in her eyes to look at her pupils, something that she had learned because apparently her brother was a soccer player and concussions were always a worry for them. Dr. Lindsay Parton, MD. Just a few minutes later, Lindsay begins to talk about the morning of March 8th.
But I feel like, because the way when she looked up at me and said, "Buddy, can I have donut and couch?" and went to take her jacket off, and she fell on that side, the other side, and there was like a pink cart laying there, and I think she scraped her face on that, but I'm not sure.
When she fell unconscious?
Yes, when she collapsed in front of me, yes.
Okay.
Okay, so now new details are being added, right? So now we hear about this pink push cart, this child's toy pink push cart. When Hannah fell and passed out, her face hit this pink cart and she scraped it on this side, on her left side. And Lindsay's kind enough to once again get up and demonstrate for us. Now, do you see how she's adjusting her story as she's shown pictures of Hannah's injuries? Almost as if she's coming up with reasons for why those bruises and scrapes are there as she finds out about them. Like, oh, she had a bruise on her left side of her face. Yeah, that probably happened when she hit her face on that pink push cart. Oh, she had a bruise on her head. Well, she fell on the concrete. And Lindsay once again does some charades for us to show us what she did when Hannah collapsed.
But
She wasn't on top of anything, she was walking.
Well, so what happened? So say this is the door.
Yeah.
She walks right here. There was like one of those push carts that you can like serve things off of. It's like a
Serving
cart. Yeah. And she fell like that, and there was a wheel. I think she hit that.
Okay.
But I don't
she
know
wasn't
that.
on top of anything. She wasn't climbing or nothing.
No, she literally just collapsed in front of me.
Okay. What exactly? How did you move her, and into what position did you move her
I
into?
really wasn't sure what was happening, so I kind of picked her up, and I was like, "Hannah, are you okay?" And I probably did the wrong thing because I wasn't sure what was happening. What's wrong? What's wrong? Wake up! Like, what's going on with you?
So were you down?
I had bed down, yeah. And I'm like, well, at first I said, "Hannah, are you okay? Get up!" I thought maybe she like tripped over her pants or something, because sometimes she'll try to like take off her shoes while she's standing up.
Yeah.
And she didn't get up, and I'm like, "Are you okay? What's up?" And she was like not saying anything to me. And so I picked her up, and I'm like, "Hannah," I probably shook her, like, "Are you okay?" And I shouldn't have done that, I don't know. I don't know if I shook her, I just was like, "Here," I was holding her, like, "Hannah, are you okay?" And then so I laid her down, and that's when I called Jason. And I said, "Jason, there's something wrong with Hannah, she's not waking up, I don't know what happened, she just walked into her and collapsed." I said, "You need to come up here now."
So were you holding her during that time?
Well, no, I was.
You were there on the
Yeah, I laid her down. I wasn't holding her very long, but like I didn't understand why she wasn't coming to. Like,
Don't worry. She wasn't shaking her. She wasn't shaking her at all. I know she said she was shaking her, but she didn't mean that. She wasn't shaking her.
And you're shaking her to get her to come to. How are you shaking her?
not shaking her, just like, "Hannah, are you okay? Hannah, are you okay? Hannah, are you okay?"
Just trying to
Like,
wake her.
And then there's a point where the detectives are like, okay, so you said she hit her face on the push cart on like the left side, but the bruise is on the right side. You know, it looks like it's on the left side because it's like your left, but it's her right. And Lindsay's like, oh yeah, you know, that's right. That's what it was. Left, right, left, right. I always have a problem with, you know, knowing the difference between left and right. So apparently, you know, Lindsay's never been good with knowing the difference between left and right or right and wrong. Sorry, I had to. At this point, Lindsay backtracks a bit and she talks about how Hannah's eye was starting to swell and get black after she fell on the concrete floor in the garage on Wednesday. And when Hannah went home Wednesday, Lindsay made sure to tell Hannah's father, Jason, what had happened. And she also claims she looked up what to do about the bruise and the internet told her to use Vicks Vapor Rub and salt on the bruise. And so she did that. And it's funny because she says that when Jason and Hannah came the next morning, the morning that Hannah apparently just passed out unconscious within 30 seconds of stepping foot into the house, Lindsay claims that she chatted with Jason for, you know, a couple minutes about, oh, you know, Hannah's face looks good. That vapor rub and salt must have worked. Her bruise is going down. About 50 minutes into this second interview, the detectives, they take the gloves off and they begin to break down the bruising patterns on Hannah.
You said when she totally bit it, her head was going down towards the ground.
yeah, she smacked her chin.
Her chin right here?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's the problem. There's no mark directly on the point of her chin. We're looking at marks.
Very little to no bruising right here in the middle. It's on the left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on the right.
Like I said, I was far away too, I was right behind him, so.
And then up underneath.
Mhm.
So when people fall, you're gonna have bruising on the sharp points, okay? So it's gonna be this point, none here, and then some here. Or if you were over here, you're gonna have some here.
And she could have, I don't know, I honestly, I was just coming out of the door and
If
then.
you fall straight forward, you're not gonna have bruising over here, and none in the middle.
Yeah.
And then bruising would have been here, and up underneath there would have been no bruising.
That's a soft spot that your body naturally protects.
Yeah.
The way your body.
That's why it's tucked in.
It's tucked in. And that's where we're getting, that's why we wanted you to come down and fill in some of these holes.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, honestly, I've been pretty honest with you this morning, a lot of these aren't adding up to a fall in the gravel.
Yeah.
With it being over here
Mhm.
and down here, and then these, I mean, she would have had to fall in, like in some perfectly aligned gravel.
So at this point, law enforcement, these detectives, they've already spoken to the doctors who were treating Hannah, and they were armed with something that Lindsay didn't have: science and facts.
Once again, you don't have to be a doctor, you've got to be a mom like that, okay? You see that bruise?
Mhm.
What's that kind of look like?
Is it older?
Older, yeah. Older, there's some yellowing all through here, and then, see this here?
Mhm.
That looks, what would you say?
Older.
To me, that looks brand new.
Oh, okay.
That is newer than even.
Okay, yeah, see, I don't know.
So what it kind of looks like is that these are all from a different time.
Yeah, and like I said, she is well. I don't think that she's been. I really don't think that she's been hurt.
You know?
No, I honestly don't. In my gut intuition, I don't think that he's a bad guy. I really don't. I think that he is a simple guy.
Here's one thing this is from a senior neurologist. Okay?
Yeah.
Lindsay admits as she's looking at these pictures that some of the bruises, they do look older, sort of yellowed as if they were healing, while others look newer. So how could Hannah have gotten those bruises from falling on gravel when they were all in various stages of healing, right? Because we're talking about the bruises on her chest, the ones that Lindsay said punctured or punked her chest. But all of these bruises had been made at different times. Now, Lindsay responds to this inconsistency, and she begins talking about Jason, how she doesn't think Jason's a bad guy, and how, she doesn't think he would hurt Hannah at all. And then the detectives interrupt her with the 1-2 punch of science and facts.
He's telling us that the brain injury that she sustained was absolutely not 24 hours prior or even an hour prior. The injury that caused this, or the incident that caused this brain injury was immediate.
That is, I have no idea. I would never hit a kid. I don't even spank my own.
Someone in that house, I'm going to be completely honest with you, someone in that house, after Dad dropped her off, injured this kid to the point where she's unconscious.
The detectives are straight telling her Hannah's brain injury did not happen on Tuesday when she fell on some gravel. They didn't happen on Wednesday when she fell off a toy train in the garage. Whatever happened went down at your house moments before Hannah became unconscious. And at first, Lindsay's sticking to her story, and she's like, I understand what you guys are saying to me, but I have no idea what happened. Hannah just walked in and collapsed. And the detectives do something that is a known police tactic. They try to give her an out. They did this with Casey Anthony when her daughter Kaylee was missing, and Casey had walked them around Universal Studios for an hour pretending she worked there. And then finally she was like, I don't work here. And they brought her into a conference room and they were like, listen, accidents happen all the time. Kids get hurt. And sometimes the parents had nothing to do with it and it was just an accident. We understand accidents happen, right? They're trying to give her an out. They're trying to relate to her. They're trying to give her something to grab onto so that she'll start to tell the truth. And so they ask Lindsay, was this an accident? Was she dropped? And Lindsay's like, no, I didn't do anything. After a few minutes of them hammering these facts in, of them continuing to tell Lindsay that, this is what the doctors and the brain surgeons are saying. Hannah's injuries didn't come from a 6-inch or a 12-inch fall. Hannah's injuries didn't come from, falling on gravel. Lindsay suddenly pivots and the story changes.
What accident caused this?
She fell on the door and hit the concrete step.
When?
Thursday morning.
Walking into the house?
Yes.
Tell us about it. Take us through it.
Details.
So in my opinion, they kind of opened that door for her, giving her an out. Was Hannah dropped? Did she get whiplash? What happened? And Lindsay just comes out with this concrete step story, right? Hannah was walking into the house on her own, and she slipped on the blanket that was around her and she fell. And Lindsay says this in a voice where she's like resigned. She's like, oh, all right, you got me. I've been lying. It reminds me so much of when my kid gets in trouble at school, my son, and the teacher calls me and then he comes home and I'm like, all right, what happened at school today? And he knows the teacher called me, but he doesn't know exactly what the teacher told me. So he starts giving me like his variation of the story, kind of like watching for my reaction. And then I'm like, no, that didn't happen. What happened, Aiden? And then he'll like tell me something else. He'll give a little bit more truth. And then I'll be like, come on, what happened? I already know. I already talked to your teacher. I know everything. Tell me what happened. And then finally, sort of very sullenly, he'd be like, yeah, I did it. What? I did it. Okay, you got me.
I opened up the door. She was coming through and she slipped on that concrete step and the metal part. She hit the metal part on her eye.
Which door?
The
back
one,
door
yeah,
into the house.
going into the house, the carpet. And so I got her back up, and she stood up and looked up at me and did say, I want donut and couch, and then collapsed.
Appreciate you being honest there. I mean, it's an accident.
You called for help.
This is my fault. I should have protected her.
It's not
Should have let her fall. I should have been holding her.
And even the injury that you were thinking, put her in the situation she was in, you told us about that, no problem. What's the difference? What's the difference in this injury and the one, you were there for both of them. If you thought this one put her in the hospital,
I didn't, I thought Wednesday. I thought Wednesday did because she smacked her.
You own this one.
So Lindsay says that Hannah slipped and hit her head on the concrete step. But is this what actually happened? Because the detectives didn't think so, and they told her this.
And I thought she was having a seizure. I didn't think that hurt her. I thought it was a Wednesday hurt her.
That's not what happened.
It is, I promise.
No, that's not what happened.
It is.
The doctor said when this injury occurred, she was out.
She wasn't. She was back up. I am being completely honest.
That's not what happened.
She wouldn't have been able to talk.
That's not what happened. There was a more severe accident that happened that just like this accident, you're afraid to tell us for some reason. Okay?
I'm not afraid to tell you anything.
Well, you were afraid to tell us that.
Well, because I got through that.
We got through that, and we're gonna get through this. Okay?
Okay.
Because that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
So tell us.
That's exactly.
That's not what happened.
It is. She slipped and fell.
No.
Okay, I did not.
She didn't fall 12 inches and traumatically bruise her.
She falls
to the point where they have to cut a piece of her skull off to relieve pressure. That's not what happened.
Once again, the police are like, listen, lady, this didn't happen from a 12-inch fall. The neurosurgeons have told us this. Something more severe happened here. So what was it? How did Hannah fall face first on rough gravel on Tuesday and she's fine? How did she fall face first on concrete on Wednesday and she's fine? And then on Thursday, she falls face first onto concrete again and she suddenly has a traumatic brain injury. And let's keep in mind, Hannah didn't have bruises necessarily. I mean, she had bruises on her eyes and stuff, but her head injuries were mostly to the back and to the side. So all of these stories, all of these narratives that Lindsay's saying that she fell face forward, like this, like she's just free falling onto the cement, that doesn't make sense and it doesn't add up because her story of where the injuries happened don't correspond with where the injuries are actually located. So they've got her, right? They're like, nope, that didn't happen. This is what the doctors say. So the story changes again. And Lindsay, once again, with a tone of sullen resignation, changes her story.
We've come a long way. We got past that, okay? Yeah. You're right there. You're right there. Thank you.
When I opened the door, I dropped her. And I slipped and fell.
What happened?
So I slipped on her blanket when I opened the door, and we both went down, and she hit that concrete step really hard.
Where at? On her head?
On her face, yeah, 'cause holding her on the left side. And when I slipped, it hit her side. I actually hit my head on the floor coming down.
It wasn't Hannah that slipped on Hannah's blanket. It was Lindsay who slipped on Hannah's blanket when she was holding Hannah, and then Hannah fell from Lindsay's arms and she hit her head pretty hard. And Lindsay claims she herself hit her head and she has a bruise on her arm from this incident of where she, had hurt herself when she fell, and she quickly shows the detectives. Look at my bruise. See my bruise? This happened when I fell. I know Hannah has a traumatic brain injury, but look at my little bruise here. Now listen, me, I bruise easily. I could just hit myself on this little table right here and I'd have a small bruise for a couple of days. If you remember, when Lindsay was being interviewed earlier and the detectives left the room, all of a sudden she's like pulling up her sleeves, checking out her arms. In my opinion, she's looking for bruises that she can now attribute to this fake fall.
And I tried to brace her and myself, but I lost my balance. She hit really hard. Then I got up and tried to get her to come to. I was checking her and I said, "Are you okay? Yeah." I did say that, "Are you okay with something?" She didn't respond.
Were you still in the garage, kind of in the doorway?
Kind of in the doorway, yeah. Right where I said I was.
I mean, I was really trying to be unbiased here, but to me, it's blatantly obvious that Lindsay is just making this all up as she goes along. She presents a scenario. They tell her that based on the facts, her scenario is not possible, and then she adjusts her story. But wait, there's more. Now we hear the ketchup story. According to Lindsay, Hannah took some ketchup from the kitchen, probably the week before. And then she took that ketchup and squirted it into the toilet. And apparently, Lindsay decided that this warranted Hannah being slapped across the side of the head. Actually, she, in her words, said, "I slapped her upside the head." But don't worry, Hannah's father gave Lindsay permission to discipline his daughter.
How does this happen?
I slapped her upside the head.
With what?
My hand. She took all the ketchup out and squirted it into the toilet. And I didn't think that hurt her. I really didn't.
And so the detectives are like, yes, we finally have some sort of admission that you have been abusive and violent with this child. And you clearly don't think there's anything wrong with it. But let's move on. Okay, what about the chest bruises? And once again, Lindsay denies having anything to do with these. But the detectives are like, come on, dude, man. You keep denying everything, but then you end up telling us the truth in the end. So just save us all the trouble and all the time and tell us the truth now. How'd she get these bruises on her chest that were in different variations of healing? And Lindsay says, well, I poked her in the chest, like kind of aggressively. When she was being bad, I would like poke her in the chest with my finger. All right. And it keeps getting worse. Now Lindsay admits that she had probably shaken Hannah after Hannah fell for roughly 1 minute. She said Hannah's head was snapping around during the shaking, and then Lindsay elaborated on her story once more, admitting that she had shaken Hannah before the alleged fall. Apparently, Hannah had been whining a lot when her father, Jason, left for work in the mornings, and Lindsay felt that this was inappropriate and annoying. So she picked Hannah up and squeezed her hard, and then they both fell down together. And after they fell, Lindsay shook Hannah some more, and she did this because she was frustrated that Hannah was whining about her father being gone. Lindsay even demonstrates this, showing how she violently shook the 3-year-old girl while shouting, "Stop doing this already." And so she shook Hannah until the little girl stopped whining, until the little girl stopped doing anything at all.
She didn't want me to go to work. And he's like, I gotta go. So he rushed out, and I was like, Hannah, you can't do that. Daddy's gotta go to work.
You shook her?
Yeah. I shook her, and I remember picking her up and squeezing her, and we did fall.
How hard did you shake her?
She was in trouble.
Yeah. And you were angry?
Yeah.
And the bruise under Hannah's chin, the one that Lindsay had vehemently denied knowing anything about, maybe it came from the train or whatever, she finally admitted that it had happened when she had hit Hannah in that area twice using an uppercut martial arts style clawed fist.
So these were closed fists like uppercuts?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is literally what she said. This is true. And the bruises on Hannah's chest, like I said, not from the gravel, but from physical discipline that Lindsay felt was her place to dole out, even though she had insisted that Hannah was, very active and, wild, but she never gave her any problems. She always listened to her. Lindsay claimed that she would aggressively and repeatedly poke Hannah in the chest and yell, "Hannah, you know better." In fact, I would argue that it's Lindsay that should know better. A 3-year-old doesn't know better when she misses her father. A 3-year-old doesn't know better when she would rather be with her father than with a violent, angry woman that hurts her. If Hannah was whining and acting out more than usual in the weeks leading up to her death, it was most likely because she was afraid of going to Lindsay's house because she knew what was going to happen to her there. But she had just turned 3 the January before. She wasn't quite old enough to verbalize that yet. So let's recap before we hear what Lindsay had to say for herself at trial. Lindsay Parton told the 911 operator, first responders, and law enforcement that Hannah had walked in and collapsed onto a carpeted floor. She also mentioned that Hannah had fallen off a toy train the day before, but Hannah got up and she was fine after this fall. That was all she knew. That was all she saw. When she talked to detectives on March 8th and March 9th, 2018, we hear that Hannah actually fell face forward onto a pink car when she collapsed. This may have been the cause of some injuries to her face, Lindsay speculated, and then later on, Lindsay claims that Hannah fell on the cement step after tripping on her own blanket while walking into the house. And then Lindsay changed her story again, and she said, no, it was actually me who fell on Hannah's blanket while I was carrying her, and I dropped her on the ground, and she hit her head quite hard. Then the floodgates open. And we have Lindsay admitting to slapping Hannah upside the head, in her words. She admitted to shaking her more than once, both before and after Hannah collapsed. She admitted to picking this small child up and squeezing her hard out of frustration and poking her aggressively multiple times in the chest simply because Hannah wanted her father, and Lindsay was sick of hearing about it. And of course, we can't forget the uppercuts to Hannah's chin. Lindsay was an adult woman beating the shit out of a 3-year-old girl. But when it came time for trial, Lindsay told us that she had made it all up.
Lindsay, did you cause harm to Hannah Wesche on March 8th?
I did not.
Did you cause harm to her on March 6th?
I did not.
Did you cause harm to her on March 7th?
I did not.
Why did you tell the police that you did?
Because I wanted to protect everybody.
And what do you mean by I wanted to protect everybody?
In the first interview, I felt like it was all about TJ. I mean, they even asked me if I was an abused wife, if he was abusing me. And I cared about Jason. I didn't want anybody to be in trouble.
So when you were previously interviewed and you said that she walked and she just pushed her hands back and fell flat on her chest, that's not your testimony today, that you don't remember that?
If that's what I said in my interview, then that's the truth. It was closer to the time.
So it's your understanding that Hannah had no survival instincts to put her hands out to catch herself?
Reject the characterization.
I'll withdraw the question. And so your testimony today is that she fell wearing a shirt, wearing a jacket on a gravel driveway, and those gravel rocks pierced through her chest with all those layers of clothes?
It could have. It was a light jacket. It was one of my kids' jackets.
But it's your testimony today, ma'am, that on 3/9, that you were willing to lose everything, your girls, your freedom, all to protect a deadbeat dad like Jason? That's your testimony today.
I didn't think he was a deadbeat dad. We were friends.
That's not my question, though. You were willing to lose everything.
No, I wasn't. I never thought I would be in trouble.
So it's your testimony today that you admitted to hurting Hannah, and you didn't think you would be in trouble.
No, I didn't. I was under the assumption that he would back me up.
So it was your thought process on 3/9 of 2018 that you could admit to poking Hannah in the chest and you wouldn't be in trouble.
Yes.
And that you could admit to squeezing her on her middle and you wouldn't be in trouble. That's your testimony.
Yes.
And that you could admit to hitting her with a closed fist multiple times under the chin and you wouldn't be in trouble.
Yes.
And then you could admit to shaking her until she lost consciousness and you wouldn't be in trouble.
Objection. That's a mischaracterization of that statement.
Approach. Ladies and gentlemen, that last question, the court has sustained objection to disregard that question. Ms. Sheehan, if you'd like to rephrase.
Yes, Your Honor. Ma'am, it's your testimony that on 3/9 of 2018, you didn't know that admitting to shaking Hannah would get you in trouble.
No, I didn't think it would.
You showed a bruise on your hand to Detective Hensley, did you not?
I did.
You claimed that when you fell with Hannah, you had a bruise.
Yes.
But it's your testimony today that that never happened. Why would you show them your hand?
It seemed logical at the time.
Well, walk me through that logic, Ms. Parton, because you said after about an hour, you stopped telling the truth, right?
Yes.
So what was the last truthful statement you said?
I don't remember the...
So at that
exact
point,
words.
ma'am, you are now telling the detectives what they want to hear. That's been your testimony.
Yes.
And one of the things that you told the detectives was that while you were carrying Hannah, you tripped and fell. Is that right?
Yes.
And when you tripped and fell, and I think you made some comment that you tripped over her blanket or your robe, is that right?
Yes.
Those weren't details supplied by Detective Turner, right?
No.
He didn't ask you if you tripped over a blanket, right?
No.
He didn't ask you if you tripped over a robe.
No.
So your testimony, your statement to Detective Turner was that you tripped and fell while carrying Hannah and she smacked her face on that concrete step. Is that right?
Yes.
None of the stuff she said happened had happened. She lied to protect Jason Wesche even after she was shown pictures of Hannah's extensive injuries. Even after she was told that the child was dead, she said she thought that it was what the police wanted to hear, and they weren't believing her when she told them the truth, so she just admitted to all of these things because she felt pressured or because she wanted to protect Jason. I mean, it really can't be both, right? If you want to protect Jason, you would think that that desire to protect him would go away once you'd seen what happened to this little girl that you claim to have cared so much about. And then it would be very easy to give the detectives what they wanted, which wasn't for you to confess necessarily. They just wanted the name of the person who had done this to Hannah. They wanted the truth of what had happened because according to Hannah's injuries, in the opinion of multiple medical health professionals who treated her, this had not been an accident. And that's what the detectives were saying to Lindsay each time she claimed it had been. Lindsay Parton made the decision to testify on her own behalf in court, and I, along with many other people, think it was the wrong decision because she came off looking very bad. She's on the stand and she's asked in court, why do you think you could hurt Hannah like this? Why do you think you could discipline and abuse her like this? Lindsay's answer is very flippant, very, very flippant is the best way I can put it. And it just didn't look good.
You indicated that it was your belief you could physically discipline Hannah.
Yes.
You could squeeze her middle.
Yes.
Was it your belief that you could hit her on the face with an open hand?
Yes.
And was it your belief that you could hit her on the chin with a closed fist?
Yes.
And was it your belief that you could shake her?
Yes.
And we're going to talk more about Lindsay's testimony in the next video. We're going to hear from Hannah's father, Jason Wesche. We're going to talk about Lindsay's defense team, their defense for her, the alternate theories that they brought up, and we're going to see whether they're plausible or possible or probable. And then we're going to sort of decide amongst ourselves, what do we think is the most likely thing to have happened here. I know this video was probably long, but I trust that you had your coffee or your snack, you were hanging out with me, and honestly, I'm enjoying being back to work. I'm enjoying diving back into these cases, and this case had me livid. So I just had to kind of get all the details that I could, because if there's people out there saying that Lindsay Parton is innocent, and there are loud voices out there saying she's innocent, if that's the case, then I want to look at it from all angles, and in the next video, we will look at it from Lindsay's angle. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to check Native out. Link is in the description box. Also, don't forget to follow me on social media, Instagram and Twitter. Handles are in the description box, along with my links to Crime Weekly, a podcast that I co-host every week with retired police detective Derek Lavasser. We are covering a really great case from the UK right now. We're in the middle of it. I think part 2 went up today as I'm recording this on a Friday, and the video will be up on Wednesday, the following Wednesday on YouTube. So go check that out. Shout out to my Patreons. Love you guys so much. I'm going live with my Patreons tonight in a couple hours actually, so I better hurry up and get this video edited because there's a lot of clips and I know there's going to be a lot of editing to do. But thank you so much for being here. Stay kind, stay beautiful, stay safe, and I will see you very soon.
Bottle's going straight down, and that river runs deep, the mountains get steep, and the voices getting too loud. All these feelings I've buried, it's looking like a cemetery. They're coming back believe it goes until it's killing you slowly. So you got to let it go. I got blood